Hello everybody, this is Mike. I'm back. I was on earlier today. Didn't think I was going to make any more videos today, but I have some time. And it's also helpful for me. I'm going through a big shift. I'm going to be moving from this country. I've been in Australia for 2.5 years. I'm going to be moving back to the States, and I'm having a lot of anxiety about it. So it helps me to, distract myself with this kind of stuff. And if I'm able to help other people, then so much the better. So this channel, if you're new to this channel, is about helping people who have been in narcissistic relationships, romantic relationships. My experiences with a borderline, but also can be with just regular narcissists as well. And what I want to do is give you an opportunity to be able to know that you're not crazy, and to share with you how I cured myself. That's a huge statement, of the damage that happened to me in that relationship. By the way, that's the only thing that I guarantee. I don't guarantee anything else, but I do guarantee that if you do these 4 things that I have put up here on the chat, if you do these 4 things with everything that you have, and you are somebody who does not suffer from a personality disorder, and you have been in a relationship with an abusive, untreated narcissist or borderline, my guarantee is that if you do those 4 things with everything that you have for as long as it takes, you will completely recover from the damage of that relationship. That's all I can offer. And my way isn't the only way. Now, it's the only way that I know of. So, if I come across as, a cult leader, that's why. I literally have seen no other way that allows people who have been infected by the toxicity of cluster B relationships. I have never seen anybody who's been in those relationships and get out. I've never seen them fully recover without doing these 4 things. I didn't make these 4 things up. I just put them in order and put numbers to them, just because human beings work well that way. All right, so what are we going to talk about? I'm going to respond to some comments. Look like there's some new people showing up, which brings me some great things to talk about. But I also want to answer the question, what happens in the mind of the narcissist or the borderline after they've discarded you? What happens when they realize that they've lost you, that they've lost the one person that truly loved them more than anybody? What happens when they realize they've lost the best possible relationship ever? Well, I'm asking this question because I was flipping around YouTube and was listening to an individual who has an idea about that. Now, I'm not going to show you his picture or give you his name or anything like that, because I'm not here to point any fingers. But I do think that he speaks very well what a lot of people think. So let's listen to him, and then I'll give you my response to what he's saying. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
Let you know, the narcissists, they will be looking back, and they probably are right now in some aspect. Maybe they're trying to hoover you, maybe they're ruminating, maybe they're thinking about, wow, the one that got away, which is you. Maybe if it's you watching this video right now and you're saying to yourself, well, I gave the narcissist so many chances. Keep in mind, this is all when you did not know the narcissist was a narcissist. You now do. You're learning more and more each and every day and becoming empowered. And for that, I applaud you. It takes a lot, and it takes an awful special person to put their time in and do their due diligence on exactly what kind of relationship they were in, which in this case was a narcissistic relationship. But the narcissists, they are looking back. Maybe not today, maybe tomorrow, maybe not tomorrow, maybe today. The thing is the narcissist will always say one thing to themselves. That one person, which is you, is the one that got away. The one bright, shining light, the person that actually gave everything they had, the person that was always there for the narcissist, the person that loved to a fault, the person that did everything they possibly could, and the person that gave, and contributed and wanted the relationship to work. but more importantly, the person that was naive and that did their best to maintain a healthy relationship and to keep things going and to offer the narcissist supply and to offer everything they possibly could to the relationship. The narcissist saw this. What they did is they took advantage of you, the situation. They devoured your goodness, your wholeness, your spirit, your light, everything. And when they did this, even then, you, the beautiful empath, you said to yourself, you know what? I'm going to give more. I'm going to contribute. And this happened insidiously.
Okay, so the one phrase that caught me, he started going off into other stuff, but the one phrase that caught me is that he believes that the narcissist looks back on you, ruminates about you, and realizes that they lost the one true person that really loved them. They realize this loss. And I want to ask you, do you believe that? Do you think that your borderline X or your narcissist X, do you believe that they look back on you and realize that they lost the only real relationship they've ever had? Do you think they look back and realize that they've lost the one person who truly loved them, and that if they had just seen you and respected and accepted what you gave them, that they would have been happy and both of you would have been happy? Do you think that they think this way? I'd be interested to know where this gentleman got his data for that. Was there a study done? There's an assumption there. So let me share with you, first off, everything works off assumptions. This is, by the way, if you want to be successful in life, you need to employ critical thinking. And one of the things, the first thing that you need to understand about life is that everything that you do, everything that everybody does is based on assumptions. You don't even realize it. The assumption that this chair will hold me up. I'm sitting in a chair. Before I sat down, I assumed the chair would hold me up. It so far is following through. I don't have to think about it. But started with that assumption. So this person has an assumption about how narcissists think. The question is whether or not his assumption is correct. Because the worst thing that can happen in life is when you have an assumption, or you have assumptions about yourself or about the universe or about your relationship to other people or just the world in general. And if those assumptions are incorrect or incomplete, you will then make conclusions and take actions based on inaccurate, incomplete, or outright false information, which will then cause you to be in serious trouble. You remember in The Office where, is it Jim? I forget the names of the guys. He creates a chair out of wrapping paper, and it looks like it's, it'll hold him up. And he sits down in it, and of course it collapses underneath him. And that's what happens when you make an assumption that is inaccurate or incorrect. Once you act on that assumption, everything falls apart and you end up getting hurt. So his assumption, without realizing it, his assumption is that narcissists think the same way that he does, which is why I started off with this thumbnail. Reality is a projection of your internal dialogue. We all do it. Now, in his defense, there's no way that he should know otherwise, because he doesn't have a personality disorder, which means that he is able to link things linearly. So for those of you borderlines, you watch my channel, bear in mind that we think differently than you. So I'm going to respond to a borderline comment where, again, the borderline is thinking that we are thinking the same as you, and there's this big disconnect. This is why borderlines think that I'm stigmatizing them. I'm not. In fact, I say a lot that borderlines can recover if they put the time into going to therapy, and if they really work at it, it'll take about 10 years at least, but they can have healthy relationships if they work their ass off and they're really motivated to heal. But until that happens, borderlines and narcissists suffer from personality disorders, which is a break from reality. That's a very serious thing. So the way that the borderline interacts with reality, with their own emotions and with other people, they can't project onto me what I'm thinking and feeling because they don't know. They don't know what it's like to be me. I have to try and figure out what it's like to be them, and that's how I know that they don't think the same way as I do. But like this guy here, I operated from the same assumption that he has, which is he believes that narcissists think the same way that he does about relationships. He also assumes that narcissists have a clear span of time, one day after the next. He doesn't realize it, but he assumes that the narcissist has an identity. Now, if you realize that narcissistic personality disorder is a mental illness, that they do not have the same relationship to reality that non-cluster Bs have. If he understands that they don't respond to reality, but they're responding to their own narcissistic fantasy that they've created to protect themselves from reality. If he understands that, then he'll realize that what he just said is complete nonsense. The idea that a narcissist or a borderline can look back in time and see the relationship accurately is wishful thinking, and it's a projection. Again, in his defense, there's no reason for him not to realize that because he doesn't understand yet what it means to have a personality disorder, what it means to not be in the same connection to objective reality, especially when it comes to romantic relationships, feelings, things like that. The thing about having a personality disorder is that they don't remember things accurately. They may not even remember anything at all. So when he went on and on about saying how you, this special empath, you gave them and you kept giving to them and you were this special person and you loved them over, he's assuming that the narcissist knows this. And that the narcissist, like somebody who doesn't have a personality disorder, that the narcissist is writing it down in their head and they've got a log and they remember all of the loving things that you've done. That they can look back into last week, last month, and they have a clear idea of how time flowed, what came before what. Because he sees reality like that, and this is his projection. This is what's happening with him. He actually is looking back at the narcissist. He's remembering all of the intense feelings that he had, and he is realizing that for him, it feels as though the one relationship he really wanted, he's lost it, which is why he's looking back on it this way. When you do the four things, and again, if you're not doing the four things, you won't know what I'm talking about. When you do the four things, your view of your relationship with your ex, your narcissistic ex, will completely shift. You will never again look back on that relationship with remorse, with pain, with rumination, with sadness, with anger, with rage. You won't think about it like that at all. You might have some memories of some of the trauma. It's sort of like, if you get attacked by a shark. It's a traumatic experience. But you don't spend any time thinking about, does the shark remember that you were the best meal that they ever had? No, you know that shark has no idea you exist. That shark was just doing what a shark does. Doesn't remember you, doesn't know about you, doesn't care about you. It has moved on. It's had many meals since you were there. And if you were to try and get the shark's attention, the shark would not even recognize you. But yet we assume that people that have personality disorders where they dissociate from their own feelings, they dissociate from events, they dissociate even from what they did the day before. They're incapable of even identifying, emotionally seeing that what they did yesterday was them. So how in the world are they going to remember you? How in the world are they going to think back on you that you were the best thing that ever happened to them? And how are they going to ruminate about, oh my God, that was so great and I didn't appreciate them? How in the world is that going to happen when they don't even realize that you exist? So if you know anything about narcissists, I'm learning a tiny bit, but if you know anything about at least what this, if you've learned the same things that I have, narcissists have no internal life. There's nobody home. That is a horrific, that's like having one of your organs removed. Imagine trying to breathe without lungs. I'm going to remember that. For a narcissist to go through life and interact with people is like you trying to breathe without lungs. They can't do it. It's a horrific feeling. So what they do is imagine you create these, you know, these imaginary lungs, and the thought of breathing through these imaginary lungs gives you some comfort, and you fantasize and tell yourself, I have lungs. It's okay, I have lungs. You don't, and you know the fact that you're not getting any oxygen keeps reminding you that you're suffocating, but you tell yourself, I have these lungs and they're perfect. This is the narcissist. On the inside, there's nobody home, there's nobody there, there's no identity. It's a horrific experience for them. And so in order to survive, they create a false reality where they are perfect, and that false reality is filled with objects, things that they use to make themselves feel valuable, worthy, lovable. They do not know the difference between that and objective reality. When they meet you for the first time, what they do is they take a snapshot of you. They take a snapshot of you, and then they put that snapshot of you into their fantasy. Then they climb back in their fantasy. Then what ends up happening is when they reconnect with you in the real world, their entire motivation is to get you, the outside object, to conform to the fantasy of the picture they have of you in their head. And the picture they have of you in their head is somebody that worships them and does everything that they want and magnifies them. So when you don't follow that, this infuriates them because it reminds them of what actual reality is, and then they're reminded of their pain and their horror, and so they become abusive. They abuse you to try and control you so that you will knuckle under and you will worship them, and then they can put you into their fantasy, and then they play out their fantasy and you play along. If you're a good codependent, you play along with their fantasy, and to the extent that you play along with their fantasy, then they like having you there. Now, unfortunately, it's never as good. You know, this is like, you know, the fantasy sex. You know, have you ever fantasized about, you know, having sex with a certain person, and then you finally get to have sex with that person, and it's not as good as the fantasy? And that's just the way things are. And you will never be as good as their fantasy. And at some point, even if you are the good codependent and you follow through and you do everything that they demand, at some point they will start to hate you because you will never live up to their fantasy. And they have to punish you for that. That's your fault for not living up to their fantasy. I wish I could share with you the details, but I remember specifically something like that happening with my borderline ex. And, you know, it was just crazy. It was so crazy I had to just walk out and leave. It was so... Of course, she hoovered me the next day, but I mean, it was one of those things. It's like, oh my God, I'm not here. That she's talking about somebody that doesn't exist. I just turned around and left. So, do you get it? This is now. Why does he say this? He's not unusual, by the way. He's just repeating what every single super empath says on their channel. That when you destroy the narcissist, that when you get rid of the narcissist, they will remember that you were the one. I mean, this is part of the codependent fantasy. So, if you are a codependent, which means if you've been with a borderline or a narcissist, by definition you are a codependent, because in order to make the relationship work, you have to meet their unrealistic fantasy projection of you. You have to go above and beyond in order to keep the relationship going. That, by definition, is a codependent relationship. That makes you a codependent, by definition. Sorry, you don't have to like it. It just happens to be objective reality. I forgot what I was saying. But your fantasy as the codependent is that when you are meeting their needs, and you notice how he said you treated them better than anybody. You, the shining light that was the most pure, the most loving. We don't know that. How does he know that he or you were that to your narcissist? What makes him think that in the narcissist's life, assuming they've had multiple relationships before they met him, what makes him think that he was the one that stands out above all of the other people? Nothing. The only thing that makes him feel that is his projection. That's what he feels. I know because I felt the same thing. I remember thinking, because my borderline told me that I was the best, that I was the best person, that I was the best person she'd ever been with. I have no idea if that's true or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I believed it. And even though, if I were to look at the relationship objectively, which I tried to do in the beginning, I started to realize that the relationship was following the classic codependent model. But I said to myself, I'm different. I'm the best. I'm the only one that has truly connected with her. I'm the only one that can really help her. I'm the only one that's going to be able to save her. Only I can do that. Nobody else will be able to do that. And that is because I, being a codependent, was deep in my regression. And like, this is what children do, the infant wants to be the only light in the mother's world. And so in order to feel relevant, we codependents come up with this fantasy that we are the ones who really know you. We put up with more than anybody else possibly could. We've connected with you more than anybody else. Therefore, because I need to feel relevant, I fantasize that when I'm not around, they are thinking about me and about how I was the true loving light of their life, and they destroyed it. Except for one huge problem. Borderlines and narcissists, they do not have what's called object constancy. Object constancy is when, if you're sitting here next to me and I'm talking with you and you say, hang on, I have to go powder my nose, and you get up to leave to go to powder your nose, I'm aware that you exist in the powder room and that we still have a connection and that you're going to be back. Borderlines and narcissists do not have object constancy because they're emotionally regressed at the age of an infant. Infants also don't have object constancy. Neither do dogs, by the way. Did you ever notice that? You know, if you leave the room for 1 minute, the dog sees you and acts like you've been gone for 1 billion years. I don't think it's exactly the same. But with borderlines and narcissists, the moment that you are out of sight, you literally stop existing. In the same way that when you're watching a movie on Netflix, and if you don't know what's happening next, and a character gets up and leaves the room, if it's a minor character, you don't know whether that character's ever coming back again. You forget about it. You move on with the movie. Somebody else comes in and it's a whole new scene with two different people and you're watching that. You've forgotten about the other two people in the previous scene. Borderlines and narcissists don't have object constancy. You're not real to them. You are an object in their fantasy, which means that the moment that you get up and leave the room, you stop existing. This is why borderlines and narcissists don't have any problem cheating on you. They don't have any problem leaving you. They just ghost you. They just get up and leave. You wake up one day and they're gone. All their stuff is gone. Maybe they've taken some of your stuff. They're gone. And there's no note. They haven't left you a message. You try and call them and there's no phone. They're gone. How can they do that? Because the moment that you are out of sight, you don't exist. So this is his fantasy, and this is the narcissism of the codependent. The narcissism of the codependent is, my love is the best, and therefore if I love you, you will always remember me. You'll never forget me. And in fact, if you destroy the relationship, you will one day wake up and realize that you had the best perfect lover that ever existed, and now you will languish in the pain and the misery of realizing that you've lost the perfect person. But that is your grandiose, childish, narcissistic fantasy of needing mommy and daddy to love you. And when mommy and daddy didn't love you, it created this huge hole. You were told as a child, because you're codependent, you were told either outright verbally or with people's behavior or their energy, you were told that your value comes from what you do, not who you are. As opposed to the healthy child who is told through either outright words or with behavior and energy that they have value simply because they exist and have experiences. So this is the sad part of the codependent. This guy's fantasy is that the borderline languish, or in his case, the narcissist languishes over the loss of the perfect partner, the codependent, the empath. All right. So I want to talk about that. I also wanted to take a look at some comments on the channel. All right, I'll get rid of that guy. I have nothing against him. I wish him all the best. Let's see here. So borderlines, as I said in the beginning, borderlines, there's a fly in here. Go away. Borderlines do not understand your experience either. So not only do you not understand a borderline, you project onto them your experience with reality, your experience with time, your experience with associating with your own identity and with your own feelings and what you did yesterday and what you're planning to do tomorrow, what you promised to do. You identify, you associate with those things. They are a part of you, your essence, your reality. They don't understand that. They project onto you their experience with their emotions, which is very different. It's not different in that we can't understand it. It's just their experience with emotions is the experience of an infant, not the experience of an adult. So infants, as I said, they don't have object constancy. They mistake need for love. Intense need is not love. My therapist said to me one time, talking about relationships, this was a long time ago, but it stuck with me. And I think I was talking about a relationship, and I definitely look back on it remembering that it felt codependent to me as I look back on it. The need, I was feeling very needy. And I really didn't want, her to leave, or, I didn't want the relationship to fall apart or something like that. And he said, there's two kinds of love. There is, I love you because I need you. And then there's, I need you because I love you. One says that love, that feeling of love, is really coming from the fact that you can't live without this person, and you have a hole inside of you that needs to be filled by somebody else. And anybody that comes along could potentially fill that hole. If you ever watched the movie Punch Drunk Love, I just watched it again recently. I mean, it's one of the most codependent, dysfunctional relationships ever. It's really just full on. These people don't know each other, and they fall madly in love with each other instantly, within minutes. They fall madly in love with each other. And they can't be away from each other. And they don't even know each other yet. So that shows loving somebody because you need them. Now, if that's your experience, that's your experience. There's nothing to feel good or bad about. It's just the way it is. But I need you because I love you is different. It means that you have spent time and invested in the relationship, seen the other person for who they are, and that means it takes time for love to grow. And it's something that's, after you've gotten to know somebody, you then start to love them in a more unconditional way. That creates a bond, and that bond creates a need. So it's different. I need you because I love you. The other one is, I love you because I need you. Borderlines love you because they need you. They don't need you because they love you. So when they talk about their empathy, when they talk about the intense feelings that they have in relationships, when they talk about that, assuming that they're untreated, they're not talking about the same kind of love that you might have, assuming you don't have a personality disorder. So I say that because borderlines get very upset when I say all kinds of things about what the borderline does. So I have a video from a while back that says, the title is, "When a borderline loves you, it means they want to punish you." Now, I can understand that would make somebody feel attacked and blamed. However, I'm not. It just is a fact. The reason for that is that borderlines, the message they got as infants was that they don't deserve to live. Of course they do. Borderlines are human beings, and they deserve to be loved, and they deserve kindness, affection. They deserve every good, wonderful, and beautiful thing that everybody else deserves. But unfortunately, like all people, borderlines respond to their programming, and their programming, either outright or by behavior or by energy, they got the impression that they don't deserve to live. And something like 10% of borderlines kill themselves for that reason. It's very painful. And at that young of an age, when you're an infant, if that's how you're programmed, that's a program that sticks. It never goes away. So what ends up happening with the borderline is that when a borderline loves you, it eventually means that they're going to punish you for that. And the reason for that is because that's their projection of themselves. They punish themselves for everything, but especially for being alive. If a borderline falls in love with you, eventually that's going to turn into a need for them to punish you simply because you exist. Now, this isn't conscious. This is just how they act out their programming. So that's what's in that title. Of course, and I went to explain that. More than likely, this person didn't bother to watch the video, but even if they did, if they're a borderline and they don't understand where I'm coming from, or if they're not in therapy, etc., then they're going to take that as a personal attack, as this person does. And in this comment, you're going to see that the borderline doesn't understand themselves and doesn't understand you. And why do I say, why is that important? Because if you can understand, I mean, the main message of what I'm trying to get to you is, if you can understand that the person that you are so in love with, that you are so messed up over, that you are in such pain about, if you can understand that they're not evil people trying to hurt you, that they're not planning it out, that they're not planning to suck the life out of you just to watch you wither away and die, that they aren't functioning in the same reality as you, that they're broken in specific ways that makes it impossible for them to love you the way that they want, that you want, and they want too. If you understand that, then you won't be taking any of this personally. And if you understand that, your projection of love that you think you have for them will shift. And you'll realize that not only did they never love you because they weren't capable of it, you never loved them because you never saw them. When you see a borderline for who they are, you're not going to expect them to love you, which means you won't put all the time and effort to get them to love you. That's why I keep pointing all this out. It's not to, beat up borderlines or to make them look bad or to hurt their feelings, because this isn't for them. I'm not a borderline. I'm not here to tell borderlines how to recover, because I wouldn't know what that is. I'm here to help people like me. And I don't have any negative feelings towards borderlines. I don't have any anger. I don't have any hate. I don't have any resentment. I have nothing but compassion for them. But I also know that unless they get therapy and work their ass off for a good 10 years and do certain things, they're not going to be able to give me what I want. So even if I meet them and I come to realize this person's a borderline, without any prejudice, I'm going to walk away and say, thank you, I'm not interested. All right, so this person says, the way you describe BPD is sickening. First off, what is the one thing that borderlines want to say? One of their arguments is that, no, I'm not a narcissist, I have empathy. Do you hear any empathy in that sentence? Is this person doing anything to try and understand why I have that feeling or that experience, or why I would say that? No. I'm now sickening. So they have to devalue me from the moment they open their mouths. The way you describe BPD is sickening. It is a mental illness, and the feelings that accompany it are very real. I'm well aware of both of those things. I've never said otherwise. No feelings are inherently good or bad. They are just there. I know. I never said otherwise. Where did you get in that title that I said that there are good feelings and bad feelings and that borderlines don't have feelings? I never said that. I said when a borderline loves you, it means they unconsciously want to punish you. And then they go on to say, of course, there is no excuse for hurting or abusing someone, mental illness or not. Some BPDs get help and have healthy relationships and good lives. Therefore, titling your video, it means they want to punish you, is sad and inaccurate. So it's sad and inaccurate because some BPDs get help. Where in that did I say that no BPD ever gets help? I never said that. Some BPDs have healthy relationships and good lives. Where did I say in that title that that no BPD ever has a healthy relationship? I didn't say that. I did make a broad statement that when a borderline loves you, it means they want to punish you. But of course, I'm talking about untreated borderlines and or undiagnosed borderlines. And then I asked, are you a borderline? I'm assuming they are. Either that, if not, they're seriously codependent. Probably dating a borderline. Another BPD comes on here and says, in response to my video, how to recover from narcissistic trauma bonding and intermittent reinforcement, which is a really great subject. I love talking about that. She says, funny, I have BPD and I do not feel this way. Well, that sounds pretty sarcastic. So I don't know what they're talking about. she didn't say specifically what I said that she doesn't feel as. She goes on to say, in fact, I stay away from people. So that's common. I've heard borderlines say that they stay away from people. Then she goes on to say, I think you are confusing comorbid NPD and BPD with people who only have BPD. So when I first got on the scene, I kept hearing about this until after doing some study and some research, I heard that psychologists are now starting to look at personality disorders altogether, and in fact, they're talking about just calling somebody having a personality disorder, and then there will be a certain kind. So this idea that there's a difference between narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder, that feeling is starting to go away, as I understand it, among psychologists. In fact, many have said that borderlines are covert narcissists. And some have called them secondary psychopaths, which means that the difference between a narcissist, an overt, your typical narcissist, and a borderline is that a borderline has a primary expression and a secondary expression. It's a fancy way of saying that there's two people in there, and that they're very close to being people that have multiple personalities. They're about as close as you can get. And that there is a psychopath that lives underneath, covertly, underneath the conscious borderline. The borderline that you think, and I've had people say this to me as well, they ask, can you help me figure out how can I just get the borderline part of her to interact with me and keep away the narcissist? And I say that's not possible, because they're flip sides. You can't have one without the other. I don't have a, oh yes, I do have a coin. So there's a heads, or which one? No, there's a heads and there's a tails. You can't just have the heads. The other side of the head is the tail. And when you have a borderline, you also have a psychopath. You can't have one without the other. And this is why when borderlines split, they often dissociate and they are psychopathic. If you've had a borderline split on you, you've seen their eyes change, right? You've seen their eyes sometimes will change color. Sometimes their facial features will change. It's like a whole different person is there. You will look them in the eye and you can see that the person on the other side of those eyes does not recognize you, does not know you. You're dealing with a different person. So for this person to say that, in essence, I don't understand what I'm talking about, because, not all borderlines have this comorbid NPD. It's just simply false. If you're a borderline, you split. If you don't split, you're not a borderline. And splitting could be anything: ghosting, silent treatment, outright yelling and screaming, slashing your tires, leaving, whatever it is, whether it's extreme or a subdued behavior, inside they're still splitting. They still devalue you. They still go from loving you or hating you. And if you don't do that, you're not a borderline. If you do that, it means that you vacillate between the so-called empathic part and the sociopathic psychopath. The psychopath is there to protect the infant borderline that is full of need. The infant borderline is full of need, and the need becomes so overwhelming that the psychopath jumps in to protect that. And that's what splitting is. When the borderline starts to fall in love with you, when the borderline feels vulnerable, when the borderline really wants you to be there for them, and they start to feel that it might turn out the way they want and they might get everything they've ever wanted, that creates such intense fear of rejection that the psychopath grabs the borderline by the hair, pulls her out, and then jumps in. That's why you see somebody else come up to the front of the eyeballs. It's a different personality. Very often the borderline will dissociate. And they might remember what's going on, but as they say, it's like they're watching things from behind. They're watching things from behind, and they're hearing themselves say and do things, and they know that what they're doing isn't accurate. They hear the horrifically cruel things come out of their mouth, or the cruel things that they're doing, and they know that what that person is doing, the psychopath, isn't, that you didn't deserve that. But that knowledge isn't enough to stop them. They also, I've heard one say that the only way that they could tolerate the feeling was allowing the impulse of the psychopathic destructive thing to come out. Even though they knew it wasn't true, that was the only thing that gave them the relief of the fear and the horror of the idea of being abandoned. That acting out, that obviously traumatic fight or flight response to the threat of feeling like you're about to die. So this borderline doesn't understand that about themselves. If they've never split, then they're not a borderline. If they have split, then they can't say that they don't have a narcissistic side to them. They can't. They may not feel that at the moment. And again, not all borderlines are murderers, but serial killers will often say, that wasn't me. When they're even if like you catch them on tape killing somebody, they'll say, that wasn't me. What it means is that they don't associate. They dissociate. They don't feel that they are that person. They mean it. So when borderlines talk about, I'm not evil, I'm not, I don't hurt anybody, at the very least, it means that you dissociated. Possibly you might not even remember what you did and said. And again, I've heard borderlines tell me this, then after years of therapy, that they've texted their husband or boyfriend and they don't remember doing it. But then they see this text that they sent. Maybe I'll just never come home and I'll never talk to you again. And they go, I don't remember doing that. When did I do that? So that shows that the borderline may not even understand themselves, but definitely doesn't understand me, because if I'm having this experience that a borderline is a narcissist, that isn't simply because I'm always conflating NPD with BPD. I think it's because if you have BPD, by definition, you have a psychopath in you that will come out at some point, guaranteed. And if that's not the case, then you're not a borderline. Here's an interesting one. This is from Codependent. This person says, I wish I was born with the talents that psychopaths have. It feels like being an antelope in a world full of lions, okay, etc., etc., etc. After being abused all my life, growing up and running into these narcs and whatnot, it seems like I'm cursed. First off, I understand that feeling. That is a very normal feeling for having gone through childhood abuse. And I understand the feeling of constantly feeling like that you're just running into narcissists everywhere you go and that you're cursed and you can't get away from them. This is another reason I put this up here, because if that's your experience, it means that is also your projection. And the reality is that even though this person's experience, because I went through the same thing as a kid, this person's experience of going through life and running into all of these narcissists, and the experience is that's all you run into is just narcissistic people everywhere. and you feel like you're cursed. No matter where you go, you're cursed to be, inundated with people narcissistically abusing you. That's how they experience it, because that's their projection. The reality is that you ran into a lot of people who were loving and kind and nice and healthy, but because you've been programmed to get your value out of trying to please abusive people, you don't remember them. They don't, you're not attracted to them. If it's somebody, a romantic interest, you will find them boring. They're not exciting enough. That means that you get your value from trying to please the unpleasable, trying to connect with the emotionally unavailable. And your experience is, I keep running into these people. No, you keep looking for them. They're looking for you too. So it's not that they're not finding you. They're looking out for prey, and they know what prey is available and what's not. And they can smell that you're available, so they do go after you. But you're also looking for them. But the interesting thing is, this person, again, assumption. This person says, I wish I was born with the talents that psychopaths had. So he has assumptions about the talents that psychopaths have. I'm assuming based on that he believes that psychopaths are what they present themselves to be, which again is an illusion, because it's their false fantasy of what they wish they were, but they're not. And that is that they are invulnerable, that they have no feelings, and that they have no problem, destroying other people, taking from them and getting what they need. The idea that because they have no feelings, they're able to get satisfaction out of their psychopathic behavior, that they're able to get fulfillment from feeding off of others, right? That's like the vampire mythology, that vampires can drink the blood and then they'll be satisfied. But the reality is that psychopaths don't have any talents. The psychopath is the expression of somebody who doesn't have a personality, that has no pleasure, that is incapable of getting any fulfillment out of anything, which is one of the reasons that they're so enraged all the time, and why they're so cruel, because you remind them of something that they will never have. They see in you somebody who has feeling, who is able to love and be loved, who is able to be successful. They see that in you and they hate it, and so they abuse you because of that. You haven't done anything to deserve it, but they abuse you for that. So psychopaths don't have a talent at all. They are somebody who is on the verge of dying. They believe that their life is in danger, and they're acting out in utter desperation. But they give off the false facade of, nothing bothers me, I have no feelings, I planned it this way. What is the thing that Trump said? Kafefi. I mean, he couldn't even say, oh yeah, I was texting something and I mistyped it. He couldn't even admit that. He had to say Kafefi means something. That's a typical, narcissist response to everything. That you never make a mistake. Because for a narcissist to admit that they made even the slightest, most innocuous mistake, that is a chink in their armor. And the slightest chink in their armor will bring the whole facade down. And then their fear is you will see them for who they really are, which is called narcissistic mortification. You will see them as being empty, having no joy, no love, no fulfillment, that they're utterly, completely pathetic, and that they hate themselves more than anything in the universe. So they can't even admit to the slightest little chink in their armor. And so you believe that, and you think that's a talent. That's why you wish that you had that. It means that the narcissists in your life achieved their unconscious objective. Especially this is true with borderlines. Borderlines want to turn you into a narcissist. For a couple of reasons, as I see it. One is they go after two different kinds of people. They're either going after the narcissist so that they can experience their codependent need to fix and get worth out of being something, out of doing something, not being something. And by constantly chasing after the narcissist, trying to get them to love them, it distracts them from their horrific pain. It's also a battle. They get into a narcissistic battle and they're going to beat the narcissist at their own game, which the borderline will. The borderline will always win over the narcissist. Eventually, when a borderline and a narcissist get together, the borderline will eventually, after suffering tremendous abuse, will eventually wear down the narcissist until the narcissist shows some need, and then they will discard them. They will destroy them and discard them. Mine did that to her narcissist ex. So they either look after the narcissist, go after narcissists, or they go after non-cluster B codependents. And they will bounce back and forth between the two. But when the borderline is with a non-cluster B codependent, their unconscious motivation is to actually turn you into a narcissist, in the hopes that perhaps you will then abuse them, and then they can play that game with you. Or if that doesn't work, if you don't do that, which of course most non-cluster Bs don't do, because they believe if I keep loving you unconditionally, you'll finally love me. That's their game. Eventually the borderline loses all interest, and the borderline will lose all respect, and then they will destroy you because they can't stand the vulnerability that you're showing, because they can't stand the vulnerability within themselves. So this means that this person actually, they were successfully implanted with that, so that now they want to be a psychopath because they believe that a psychopath will be loved. That's what this person doesn't realize. They believe that a psychopath has the ability to get the borderline to love them, and it means that probably mom was a borderline or had borderline tendencies, and what you really want is mom to love you. And of course, I'm also just talking about myself. That's definitely true of me. So that's why what I'm seeing in that. And I had that same experience myself. I remember with my borderline ex, it might have been after the final discard or around the final discard, I thought long and hard about becoming a narcissistic, psychopathic person and hoovering her back, with the belief that if I could just abuse her the way her narcissist abused her, she would love me. Of course, that never would have worked. But, sorry, there's a fly. All right, you just watched me kill a bug. Okay, so I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. Talked a lot today. This has been helpful. Like I said, I'm having a lot of anxiety because I got a bunch of stuff going on. I have to leave the country, et cetera, and I needed a break from that, so this was helpful. No questions. 23 people. You guys are getting smart. I've told you that the best way to interact with me is with an honest question, which means you think I have the answer to something that you don't, or an honest feeling. But I don't see any of that here. Yeah, vulnerable narcissism equals covert narcissism. I've seen that back and forth. I don't know. These phrases, I'm having a hard time catching up with them. Inverted narcissism, vulnerable narcissism, covert narcissism, secondary psychopath. I like the word secondary psychopath for borderlines because that was my experience. And Abmo32, welcome to the channel. This is obviously you're new to the channel. Let's just analyze it. Again, the best way to interact with me is to ask a question. When you ask a question, you write the word question so I can see it. And then your question is an honest question. If you don't do that, unfortunately, you put a target on your head and I may psychoanalyze you. But you have stepped into my bear trap because you have shown to all of us how much of a codependent you are. How did I do that, you ask? Allow me to share this with you. And again, I hope you don't take this personally. My desire is to help. Hopefully this will be helpful for you. So the title of this channel is The 4 Things That Heal BPD and NPD Abuse. And I don't care who you are. My experience, every single person that I've interacted with who is not a cluster B, who's been in a relationship with a narcissist or a borderline, every single one of them has been damaged and they've never truly recovered unless they've done these 4 things. By definition, you are codependent. If you've been with a borderline, by definition, you are a codependent. Because to be with a borderline means that you have to interact with them codependently. It's impossible to interact with and stay in a relationship with a borderline if you aren't constantly taking up the slack, forgiving them for doing things, running around on eggshells. These are codependent behaviors designed to keep a codependent relationship working. So if you have been with a borderline, you can't in one breath say, I dated a borderline, but I'm not codependent. That's just not possible. You've just stated an impossibility. And one thing that is true is that codependence, like borderline personality disorder and all kinds of other things, alcoholism, drug addiction, gambling, these, if we don't want to call them diseases, these dynamics have inherently within them denial. So the fact that you need to say that just because I was with a borderline doesn't make me codependent, in and of itself, again, defines you as a codependent. If you weren't a codependent, you would say, wow, everybody who's been with a borderline is a codependent. I wonder if that is true about me. I'd really like to know. But that's not what you said, is it? You didn't even explore it. You had to prove to me that you weren't. Number one, because denial is part of it. But the other one is that for you to accept the label of codependent, you feel that shames you, which is part of being codependent. We operate from shame. Our whole lives are about trying to disprove the shame that we feel. So, not everyone who is with a BPD is a codependent, but most. Now, does that mean that you are somehow better than every other person? Because you say most, so that's big of you. Yeah, I had the exact same relationship as you did. I did the exact same things that you did. I have the exact same feelings as you. And yeah, you're a codependent. Most people that do what you did are, but I'm not. What makes you so superior to every other person that became codependent that you're not? That's a very codependent thing as well, because again, shame, to admit that there's anything, quote, wrong with you is shameful. Whereas if you're a healthy person, you are not embarrassed to admit when something doesn't work right, when you are at a loss, when you're sick, when something's broken. Your value doesn't come in being perfect. Your value is because you exist. So you can say, yeah, I have this problem, I have that problem. But if you're a codependent, you're not allowed to have any mistakes. You're not allowed to be imperfect, because your worth comes from being perfect and doing perfect things. And being codependent is flawed. That's bad. And it's a very codependent thing to say, most people are codependent, but I'm not. Other than that, my videos are amazing. Well, if my videos are so amazing and you're not a codependent, I am a codependent. How is it that I am at a loss, I am beneath you because I'm a codependent and you're not? You somehow avoided that even though you went through the exact same thing that I did the same things I did, had the same feelings I did, to such a degree that my videos are amazing. You identify with them, except for the fact that you're not a codependent. Does any of that make sense? Is any of that logical? Doesn't sound logical to me. Oh, I just got invited to Sweden. That was very nice. So again, if you have a question, it helps if you write the word question, please. Naku Nectar. Can borderline be vindictive like narcissist after they were abandoned? So welcome to the video. As I've said earlier in the video, borderline personality disorder is a form of narcissistic personality disorder. So the answer to that question is obviously yes. What else? I thought I took care of that problem. I'm just looking for the questions. I don't see one here. So there's a lot of new people, it looks like. So let's go through the 4 things. Let me make it again very clear. If you want what I have, you got to do what I do. Now, if you don't need what I have, if you don't need fixing, if you don't need to heal, fixing is the wrong word. If you don't need to heal from the damage that was done to you by your narcissistic or borderline ex, if you don't need that, then obviously these 4 things won't be what you need. But as I said, if I didn't do this, I wouldn't have healed. And the one thing I can claim is that I've completely healed from my relationship with my borderline ex. Complete, total healing. I have 0 negative feelings about her. I would never even think about her if it weren't for this channel. For the 4 things that you need to do to achieve that is you need to go full no contact. That means you have to make it impossible for them to contact you. That's what no contact means. Not just not calling them. No, you make it impossible for them to contact you. If you don't make it impossible for them to contact you, you haven't gone no contact. Many people watching this channel haven't had contact with their borderline for years, but that doesn't count. They're still thinking about them. They still are waiting. You didn't get rid of the phone, or you didn't get rid of the email, or you didn't block something. You know that if they wanted to, they could find you and contact you. And so a part of you is still waiting, which means you haven't gone no contact yet. Second is you have to work all 12 steps of coda.org. People say, I don't have to work those steps. And this is do the 4 things. So you can do number 1, and if you don't do number 2, which is to work the 12 steps with a sponsor, then you haven't done what I did. And I can't say whether or not you'll heal or not. My experience is people who haven't, they don't fully heal. But the people who have followed that, and again, I didn't make this up. So even though I'm telling you to do the 4 things, I didn't make it up. But people who have done that on the channel tell me that they're doing the 4 things, including going to Coda, getting a sponsor, working the steps, and they're having real success and healing from the relationship, which means that you don't have any rumination, you don't think about them, you don't have revenge or anger. You see it for what it was, and you see that it was you trying to work out your unconscious childhood issues. And again, anybody who criticizes the 12 steps for overcoming codependence, anybody who says that and has not done the 12 steps, you can't talk about something you haven't done. And I've never heard anybody who's worked all 12 steps and then come back and said, yeah, the steps don't work. I've never heard that. I've heard people halfway through say they don't work, but I've never heard somebody do all of them and say they don't work. Number 3 is you got to work with a psychologist who understands cluster B personality disorders. And number 4, daily meditation. You do all those 4 things, no contact, 12 steps, work with a psychologist, daily meditation. If you do those things with everything you have, in my experience, you will completely heal from that relationship. And if you don't, in my experience, I've never seen anybody who fully healed. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, it just means I've never seen it, and it wouldn't have worked for me if I had done that. So, somebody has a lot to say here. Again, I really am more interested in your questions, but I'm bored, so let's see what's going on here. Again, it's just somebody telling their story, which is the same as the rest of us. Here's what's so helpful about the 12 steps, by the way, is that you get involved, or 12-step programs, you get involved with a group of people who have the same experiences you have. The reason why that's important is that you start to realize you're not unique. Until you do, the reason why when people come onto my channel, and this happens often, they want to email me, they want to talk to me on the phone, they want to have some kind of connection with me. And this is why I offered the coaching service, which I now no longer do, because I've come to realize that it's not my job to be a psychologist. It's not my job. It's not my job to be a therapist. At least not in terms of narcissistic abuse. It's not my job to work with people that way. But the reason why people want to do that is because they feel like for the first time they're not alone. And they say that. Your story is exactly like mine. You and I are so connected. And the truth is, it's not. I'll look at their story and the story will be completely different except for one thing. We both dated a borderline. Other than that, there's nothing that's the same about it. But the feeling that you have that I and you are connecting is because you feel unique. You feel alone, which is what the borderline and the narcissist want to do. They want to isolate you and make you feel isolated and alone, because if you realize what's going on with other people, you're going to go, I don't want to do this anymore, and you'll leave. They don't want that, so they isolate you. Your parents did the same thing. So when you work with a group, you start to find out you're not all that unique, and you start to realize, I'm just some guy wasting your time babbling on and on about all kinds of stuff. And that we share the same feelings and experiences because we went through it. Like people, been to war, we have that same experience, but so do millions of other people. So that's the great thing about going to Coda, is that besides the 12 steps, which I think are absolutely groundbreaking and fundamental and will heal things that therapy can't, being able to look in a room full of people and being able to relate with all of them takes away that feeling of isolation and being alone and not being seen or understood. All right. Mike asks a question. How long can a split last? That's an interesting question. You haven't done the 4 things, have you? How did I know that? I'm going to tell you how I know that in a little bit, but let me read the rest of your question. Got recently rejected for the 4th time. Really, only the 4th time? That's it? 2 years no contact. No, you never went no contact. If you had gone no contact, she never would have been able to contact you again. 2 years no contact. She got back in spring, been back and forth whole summer. How long can a split last? So, you're telling us the context of the question is that she was gone for 2 years and then came back. Let's see, you haven't said if she contacted you, so let's see. Got recently rejected for, so it was recent. So she was gone for 2 years, hoovered you back, and then she split on you again. All right, so what's behind your question isn't You're not asking because you're curious and you want to know. I'm interested. How long can a split last? As if there's like an expiration date. Oh, 3 years? Oh, splits can't last that long. So I'm not even sure you're really understanding what I mean when I say split. But that doesn't mean that they split from you. You understand that? So, but the question, how long can a split last? What's behind your question is, I want to know how long it'll be before she has to come back to me. This time she was gone for 2 years. And then she was gone for 2 years and then she rejected me again. So I want to know how long I have to wait. My question is, why would you want to wait for somebody that's going to do that to you? It's a rhetorical question. I know the reason why. It's because you're addicted. You can't live without her. The thought of her not loving you is killing you. Literally. It's killing you, the thought that you can't fix it and make it right and make her want you and get your narcissistic fix, which is to be with the borderline when they're love bombing you. You want to know how long it's going to take, and you want me to give you like an exact time. If I say, oh, it takes exactly 2 years and 1 day, then that will give you some, okay, only, you know, we've gone 1 day, so it's just 2 years. And then you're going to count the days because you're still in it. Because you're still totally, completely subservient and addicted to that sweet, sweet borderline abuse. So my suggestion to you is that it can last forever. There is no time, there's no expiration on a split. There's no expiration after a certain point. They won't come back and hoover you. You know, the thing about it, about when they split on you, is that the split will last for as long as it takes for you to start getting your life back together. When you start to stop thinking about them, or if you start to feel empowered, they can smell it. And they can smell it from anywhere in the world. And then they'll magically be back. When you start to give up and you go, you know what? I don't even know why I was with her to begin with. All she did was hurt me, and I'm going to move on. Oh, God, I feel so much better. Ring, ring. Hello? Oh, hi, honey. So the split will last as long as you know, as long as you're obsessed with her. And then when you're not, she'll show up again. Unless you truly do go no contact, which is you make it impossible for her to contact you. If you don't do that, you haven't gone no contact, and you didn't go no contact. You say 2 years no contact. It wasn't 2 years no contact. The fact that you still think about her, the fact that 2 years later, she can still hoover you back, means that you never stopped. You never stopped being obsessed with her. The connection, even if it was on a deeply unconscious level, it never stopped. Because if it did, when she came back 2 years later and said, let's get back together, you're going to go, what the hell are you talking about? That was 2 years ago. I'm a totally different person. And I did not like the way you treated me. I'm not getting back together with you. No, what did you do? Maybe you made some mild protest, but then you took her back. And then what did she do? She rejected you again. Oh my God, I'm so surprised. How did that happen? So Mike, my suggestion is to do the 4 things. Do the 4 things. You never have to have me excoriate you like this ever again. What else? Nothing else? Okay, guys, that's it. By the way, I have a couple other channels. There's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. In fact, I'm going to start talking about what's going on at some point. I'm going to start talking about what's going on in the world and how it's a global expression of borderline, like collective unconscious borderline personality disorder. And that is on odyssey.com. You can look for my channel BPD relationship breakup. That used to be the name of this channel, but I changed it. So you can look at odyssey.com. I wish they would. I hate auto spell. I hate that. Don't tell me what I wrote. I know what I wrote. Odyssey.com, ODYSEE.com. Look for BPD relationship breakup. Yeah. All right, what else? Mitch says, oh, it's something else. I'm not going to go into that. Oh, sorry, a question just got thrown up here. Question. I got attached to my borderlines family. I don't know what that means. Emotionally, great people, and she was a high school friend who connected every year or so before it became a relationship. Should I inform her family to help her? Why? Have they asked for your help? No. I guess that's a decent question, but it is also kind of codependent. No, if somebody asks for your help, you can help them. But it's none of your business. It's hard for me to believe that they don't have some issues either. You know, usually, I mean, almost virtually, borderlines are created by their parents. So one of them is a narcissist or a borderline. I mean, I can't say that for a fact. I don't know them. And I'm open to the idea of this not being the case every time, but I've never seen it. But the way borderlines are created is that in infancy, they are abused and or neglected to such a degree that something in them snaps. And it may be that it was congenital, you know, brain issue, but it's still the same thing. Something snapped in her. And it probably came from her parents, unless she was adopted or something like that. So the idea that is coming from your question, which sort of gives off the feeling, I'm not saying you're doing this, but it gives off the feeling that her parents are, oh, you say it, great people. Her parents are great people. Her family, maybe you didn't say parents. So maybe you're talking about brothers and sisters, things like that. Her mother for sure. Her stepdad is a top bloke. If he's with a mother that's not so great, at the very least he's a codependent. So there's some dysfunction there. No, it's none of your business. The only time that I would bring that up is when you are going no contact with your borderline. And I'm enjoying my brewed ginger beer, by the way. My kombucha brewed ginger beer. I'm going to miss this. They don't have this in the States, as far as I know. I'm really going to miss this. I forgot what I was saying. The only time I would ever bring that up is if I was going no contact, and I was telling it, you know, if you choose to, and you don't have to. As far as, I mean, they usually don't deserve that, because they've already just bailed on you and gaslit you and ghosted you, and I mean, so it's not like you owe them any explanation. You can just decide to leave if that's easier, in my belief. But if you're going no contact, you tell your borderline, I'm leaving this relationship. It's toxic to me. And for my own health and safety, I'm going to make it impossible for us to communicate. And I just want to suggest that you look into borderline personality disorder. I can't say for sure, but I think you might have it. But that's up to you whether you decide to or not. Having said that, I'm out of here, goodbye. And then you break off all contact with them. And I only say that because it's possible you might be the only person that tells them that. And then when life gets bad enough, they might actually remember that and go do something about it. 99.9% chance they won't. But at least you put the seed in. And that is completely different from volunteering to take them to go to therapy. In other words, if you say to them, I think you might have borderline personality disorder, and they say, yes, I do, don't leave me, I promise I'll go. If you stay with me, I'll go. Come with me. You say, no, I'm really glad you're going to go. You should go, but not because of me, but because of you. Thank you. Bye-bye. You say, I asked because it didn't start until it became an intimate relationship. We had been friends over it. Yeah, anyway. Yeah. It started however it started. All right, that's it for me, guys. That's all I got. I've babbled on and on. The only thing of value that I've said in this is go do the 4 things if you want to heal. And I mean it. Everything else is far less important. All right. See you guys next time. Take care of yourselves.